My wife slept with men in bars, claiming she deserved it. Here's my revenge story. As a 32-year-old guy, I never thought that, only 3 years after getting married, my marriage would be in danger of failing. My daughter, who is 7 months old, and I have a 26-year-old wife, Janet. On the surface, our marriage appeared to be going well, but like many things in life, this was not the case. Our relationship started to show signs of cracking a few days ago. It was a typical day, nothing special about it. I was left alone with our kid, who was in dire need of a diaper change, while Janet was in the shower. Naturally, I glanced around the room and saw that there were no diapers in the vicinity. I went to collect one of the spares that Janet always kept in her bag when she took the baby for walks. Not only did I expect diapers in that bag, but I also discovered something much more sinister that would shatter all of my preconceived notions about my wife and our marriage. I soon enough located the diapers as I dug through the bag. However, a tiny packet dropped to the ground as I was pulling one out. I had never seen a pack of condoms like that before. For a brief minute, I was in complete astonishment, staring at the packet. There was one condom left out of the 3 in the pack. I was shocked to learn that 2 had been utilized. My thoughts were racing. Why was this with Janet? And why had 2 been utilized earlier? I was trying to make sense of everything, and questions kept popping into my head. My heart rate increased. I attempted to reason, thinking there might be a harmless explanation, but I was unable to come up with anything that made sense. Every second that went by made my heart sink. I hurriedly changed my daughter's diaper and pocketed the condoms after being brought back to the present by her crying. But my thoughts were constantly racing. I knew I had to face Janet right away when she emerged from the shower, still wiping her hair and humming gently. This could not fester for me. I took the condom packet out of my pocket and presented it to the infant after she had fallen asleep in her crib. I questioned, my voice tense with suppressed emotion. "What's this?" Her first response was one of disbelief. She tried to gaslight me after swiftly claiming the condoms weren't hers, which shocked me much. She even implied that they may belong to me. For a time, I was dumbfounded by her outrageous deception. "But you just pull them out of your pocket, right?" she asked, turning my reminder that I had found them in her bag into a game. In an attempt to brush it all off as a joke, she even laughed. I was so frustrated that I persisted and wouldn't allow her to avoid the truth. I insisted on knowing why she had condoms in her purse. Janet began reciting a narrative about how she had given 2 condoms to her buddy Kyle the previous evening, a hint of humor visible in her eyes. She said that after Kyle and the guy they met at the pub hit it off, they didn't have any protection, so Janet handed them 2 condoms like a kind stranger. I looked at her astonished. Was this really the best that she could do? Was that really what she thought I would believe? She insisted that was the truth when I inquired whether she really thought I was so naive. To support her narrative, she even promised to give Kyle a call. However, I was aware of this. What was the purpose if Janet was lying when Kyle would probably cover for her anyhow? The dispute intensified. Janet broke down in tears and accused me of not understanding her at all and not trusting her. She even claimed that I was being unjust to her after everything that had happened to her since the baby was born, pulling out the postpartum depression card. I was accusing her of cheating when she said she felt alone, overburdened, and exhausted all the time. I felt bad for thinking that she might be having problems. What if I wasn't seeing it? However, my reasonable side of me then came out. At best, her justifications were weak, and I couldn't get rid of the impression that she was withholding something from me. After that confrontation, the mood at home became icy and hostile. Janet began withdrawing into herself, spending hours in bed, curled up in the dark, consuming little food, and hardly communicating with me. Normally, even if I wasn't at fault, I would have been the one to apologize first to diffuse a conflict and keep things amicable. However, things were different this time. I knew I had every right to be suspicious, so this time I couldn't bring myself to apologize. I was unable to let this go. First up, many of you left insightful and encouraging comments on my post, and I sincerely appreciate that. As many of you have noted, Janet was raising a serious red flag in my face, and I shouldn't have allowed her to trick me into believing that addressing her was the wrong thing to do. You were accurate. Many others also wanted to know how Janet and I came to this point in our relationship. I believe it's critical to give some background. I have known Janet for more than 6 years, our mutual buddy through a gathering where we first met. Although I'm not usually one for parties, my friend had recently won a promotion, so it was a special occasion, and he demanded that I join him in celebrating. That's when I initially laid eyes on Janet. She was the most stunning woman in the room. She exuded energy and was often grinning and giggling with pals. I never asked for her phone number, even though we talked, danced, and enjoyed one another's company throughout the evening. After the party finished, I almost instantly regretted it. I asked my friend whether he knew her because I couldn't stop thinking about her for the following few days. Although he didn't have her contact information, he volunteered to ask his coworkers if they did, as one of them was friends with her. My friend was able to get her number for me after some coaxing. I texted her after a week of waiting. When I eventually messaged her, she responded almost immediately, even though I didn't want to come across as overly eager or desperate. She said she was sorry she hadn't asked for my phone number as well. From then on, things happened really fast. When we first started dating, I quickly became utterly enamored with her. Janet has always had an open mind. She told me she didn't want a full-time job since she didn't like being restricted to one location or routine, and that she worked part-time. She enjoyed being independent, socializing with friends, and living life as she saw fit. Her independence was something I respected at the time, but now when I look back, I see that it could have been a warning sign. Her lifestyle appealed to me because I was very immersed in my own work and wasn't satisfied at my job. It was, in a sense, an escape. I proposed after 2 years of dating. Our wedding was small and personal, attended only by close friends and family. Janet stated that she would prefer to use the money for a trip rather than anything ostentatious. That's what we actually did. During our 15-day tour across Europe, everything seemed ideal. Janet fell pregnant 1.5 years after we were married. We hadn't planned on it, at least not yet. Prior to starting a family, we both desired to travel and see more of the globe. Janet was scared to learn out she was expecting. I was profoundly wounded by her suggestion to end the pregnancy, as I have always desired to have children. I expressed my desire to be a father to her, but I never put any pressure on her to keep the child. She ultimately made the choice to retain the child. Her pregnancy wasn't easy. She didn't have any serious health issues, but she did have extreme mood swings. She thought she was losing the independence she so dearly loved and that she was stuck. I did my best to be sympathetic and encouraging to her. I made sure she had all she needed and assumed more responsibility for the house. After the birth of our daughter, things became even worse. I tried my best to support Janet throughout her postpartum depression, which I knew was common after childbirth. To assist out and give Janet some alone time, I even hired a full-time nanny. I urged her to get out with friends and pick up some of her favorite pastimes. I reasoned that if she was content, it would facilitate her relationship with our kid and lessen the strain she was under. Looking back, though, I see that maybe I gave her too much latitude. Janet returned to her old habits 2 months after our daughter was born, leaving me at home with the baby while she went out with friends to bars and clubs. I convinced myself that a contented mother would make a better mother, just as the therapist had suggested. But it's clear to me now that she was abusing her freedom in a completely other way. Second update. I wasn't prepared to back down after confronting Janet and seeing the condoms in her luggage. Although I could not prove it, I suspected something was going on. Janet felt even more suspicious because she was so careful of her phone. She never left it alone and always kept it handy, sometimes even tucked under her pillow when she slept. Not that I could have just asked her to turn it over and open it to show me what was inside. She would accuse me of losing trust in her if I did that, which would only spark another argument. I then made the decision to use my creativity. I began to search her social media profiles for anything that sounded strange. Although the majority of her accounts were secret, I was still drawn to a few public ones, especially one that included a picture of her and her closest buddy Kyle. She had told me that absurd story about condom lending, and it was the same Kyle. I was so intrigued that I had to look over Kyle's profile. At that point, I learned something that caused me to start doubting everything. Kyle was married and had a small child. I reflected on what Janet had told me about Kyle meeting a man at the bar who required condoms. Was Janet truly claiming that her husband was being unfaithful to Kyle? If that were the case, was Janet assisting her in doing so? It was unbelievable to me. I went up to Janet once more, but I approached her differently this time. I apologized to her for not believing her when it came to the condoms and told her I believed her. I told Kyle that I would trust her if she truly needed them. Janet told me additional stories about Kyle and her adventures in bars, seeming relieved. Although she made it seem innocuous, she depicted Kyle as someone who flirted with other men on a regular basis, and I sensed there was more to the story. I dropped the bombshell after that. "Isn't Kyle married and has a toddler?" I asked. "Is her spouse aware of all of this?" Janet went cold. No, that's not what I meant," she mumbled as her face turned pale. "That's not Kyle at all. It was only a jest." However, I didn't buy it. I kept pressing her, and finally she broke. She acknowledged that the tales she had been sharing with me were actually about her rather than Kyle. For months, Janet had been unfaithful to me, and it was she who was attracting men at clubs. Knowing the truth made me feel strangely relieved, even though I was enraged. I didn't have to doubt myself as much, at least now. I didn't have to question if my suspicions were baseless. I was betrayed by Janet, and there was no turning back now. Last revise. Janet's disclosure made me realize that our marriage was done. I would never be able to trust her in the same way again, and I would not continue to be in a relationship in which I had to question everything she did. I moved into the guest bedroom and began discussing divorce with a lawyer. I also expressed my desire for sole custody of our daughter. When I told Janet, she was incensed, but I didn't mind. She was going to have to deal with the fallout from the decisions she had made. After several weeks, Janet vacated the residence. After I filed for divorce, I was given sole custody of our daughter due to the proof of her adultery and carelessness. Janet realized she had no leg to stand on, so she didn't put up much of a struggle. After a few months, everything fell apart, and I'm now gradually beginning to reconstruct my life. Being a single parent has presented challenges, but it has also been tremendously fulfilling. I wouldn't exchange the knowledge I've gained about being a mother and a father to my kid. Janet has made an effort to stay in contact, but I have kept a distance from her. In the future, I might permit her to have supervised visits with our daughter, but right now, my priority is my child. All of this has taught me some difficult lessons, but the most significant is that trust is the foundation of any successful relationship. It is nearly tough to fix once broken. Furthermore, you occasionally have to let go of someone, no matter how much you love them. I appreciate you listening to my tale. I hope it is useful to someone who may be experiencing a similar situation. Keep in mind that you should be with someone who values and respects you. And if they don't, it's acceptable to end the relationship. In my shoes, how would you have handled things? Tell me in the comments below. I'm glad you could come see me today. Please remember to subscribe, like, and set on notifications if you enjoyed this video in order to receive future updates. I'll see you later, and take care.